I used to think that love meant sacrifice. That being a good daughter meant swallowing your pride, your dreams, your entire paycheck, and smiling while you did it. I learned that lesson early, watching my mother's face light up when I handed her my first real paycheck from my internship at 19. She had hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, whispering how proud she was, how I was saving the family. I remember feeling 10 feet tall that day, like I had finally earned my place at the table. That was 11 years ago. I am 30 now, and I have been paying for that one moment of validation ever since. My name is Eleanor Vance, though everyone calls me Ellie. I work as an architect at Morrison & Associates, a prestigious firm in downtown Seattle. My office has floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the sound, and on clear days I can see the Olympic Mountains in the distance. I design buildings that will stand for generations, structures that will house families, shelter dreams, create memories. The irony is not lost on me that I have spent the better part of a decade building a home for people who never saw me as anything more than a walking ATM. The day everything changed started like any other. I was reviewing blueprints for a $12 million residential project when my phone buzzed on my desk. Mom's name flashed across the screen, accompanied by a text that made my stomach clench with familiar dread. "Sweetie, the mortgage payment is due next week. Can you transfer it by Friday? Your father's back is acting up again, and we need money for his physical therapy appointments." I stared at the message, my jaw tight. The mortgage on their house, the house I had been paying for, in full. For the past 6 years. The house that was in their name, filled with furniture I had bought, decorated with art I had carefully selected and paid for with money earned from 60-hour work weeks and skipped lunches. I glanced at my own reflection in my computer monitor. Dark circles under my eyes, a face that looked older than 30, stress lines already forming around my mouth. I typed back a quick response. "Of course, Mom. I'll take care of it." My fingers hovered over the send button. For just a moment, I considered adding something more. Considered asking why Dad couldn't contribute. Why my younger sister Sarah never chipped in. Why I was the only one responsible for keeping a roof over their heads. But I had learned years ago that asking those questions only led to guilt trips and emotional manipulation. So I hit send and went back to my blueprints, pushing down the resentment that had become as familiar as my own heartbeat. That evening, I sat in my small one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. It was not much, barely 800 square feet. But it was mine. Or at least, the lease was in my name, even if I could barely afford it after sending thousands to my family every month. I had a futon instead of a real couch because I had bought my parents a leather sectional last Christmas. My kitchen table was from IKEA, assembled by myself on a Sunday afternoon, while their dining room boasted a custom-made oak table that had cost me $3,000. I opened my laptop and navigated to my bank account. A ritual I performed every month with a mixture of resignation and silent rage. I had $47,000 in my checking account. It sounds like a lot. I know. But that was the accumulation of 3 months of paychecks. And I was about to watch half of it disappear. I transferred $3,200 for the mortgage. Then another $800 for utilities. Then $500 for Dad's physical therapy. Then another $600 because Sarah's car needed new tires and she was between jobs again. By the time I closed my laptop, my checking account read $41,900. I had given them over $5,000 in one evening. And I would not receive a single thank you. Just an expectation that I would do it again next month. And the month after that. And every month until I died or went bankrupt. Whichever came first. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo in our family group chat. Sarah, my 26-year-old sister, posing in front of a restaurant I recognized as one of the most expensive in downtown Seattle. She was wearing a dress I had never seen before, probably designer. Her hair freshly done. Her nails perfectly manicured. The caption read, "Treating myself because I deserve it." I felt something ugly twist in my chest. I remembered being 26. I had been working 2 jobs. My day job at a smaller architecture firm and weekend shifts at a coffee shop, just to afford rent and still send money home. I had eaten ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for dinner while Sarah went to brunches and concerts. But I had told myself it was temporary. That once I got promoted, once I made more money, things would be different. Things were different now. I made 6 figures. Sarah made excuses. The next text came from Mom. Your sister looks so beautiful. Doesn't she? I'm so glad she's taking care of herself. You should go out more. Ellie. You're 30 and still single. People will start to talk. I did not respond. I never did when Mom made those little digs. Those subtle reminders that despite everything I had sacrificed, I was still somehow failing at being the daughter she wanted. 2 weeks later, I sat through another mandatory family dinner at their house in Bellevue. The house I paid for. Let me remind you. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. The neighborhood was the kind where everyone drove luxury SUVs and belonged to the country club. My parents loved telling their neighbors about their successful architect daughter. They just conveniently left out the part where their successful architect daughter was bankrolling their entire lifestyle. I arrived exactly on time, carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Mom answered the door with a bright smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Ellie, come in. Come in, dinner's almost ready. Sarah's already here. I followed her inside, my eyes automatically cataloging everything I had purchased. The oriental rug in the entryway. The crystal chandelier overhead. The paintings lining the hallway. My inheritance. I used to joke to myself. Except I would never inherit any of it because my name was not on the deed. Sarah was sprawled on the living room couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I walked in. Hey, she muttered, not bothering to make eye contact. Hey yourself, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I had learned that showing any emotion around Sarah only gave her ammunition. Dad emerged from his study, looking comfortable in his worn sweater and slippers. He had retired 3 years ago at 60, claiming his back could not handle his accounting job anymore, though I noticed his back seemed fine when he was golfing twice a week at the club. Eleanor, he said, giving me a brief nod. We were not a hugging family. At least, not when it came to me. I had seen Dad embrace Sarah plenty of times. Seen Mom stroke her hair and call her my baby girl. But I got nods and distant smiles, like I was a respected colleague rather than a daughter. Dinner was served in the dining room at the custom table I had bought. Mom had made roast chicken, my favorite, which I knew was her way of buttering me up before asking for something. The first 20 minutes passed in mundane conversation about the weather, about Dad's golf game, about Sarah's latest failed job interview. Then Mom struck. Ellie, honey, your father and I have been talking. She glanced at Dad, who suddenly became very interested in his plate. The property taxes are due next month, and they've gone up quite a bit this year. We were hoping you could help us out. How much? I asked, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. About $8,000. I set my fork down carefully, using every ounce of self-control to keep my face neutral. $8,000. On top of the mortgage, the utilities, the endless stream of emergencies that always seem to require my immediate financial intervention. That's a lot of money. Mom. I know. Sweetie. But you're doing so well at your job, and we've given you so much over the years. We raised you, paid for your education. She said it so casually, as if the guilt trip was not sharp enough to draw blood. I wanted to remind her that I had paid my own way through college with scholarships. Student loans I was still paying off. And those 2 jobs I had juggled. I wanted to ask when exactly I had signed up to be their personal bank. But I did not. I never did. Fine, I said quietly. I'll transfer the money next week. That's my girl, Mom beamed at me, then immediately turned to Sarah. See, this is what family does. We support each other. Sarah smirked, and I saw something flash in her eyes. Contempt. Maybe. Or satisfaction. She knew I was the family cash cow, and she was perfectly content to let me bear that burden while she coasted through life, jobless and responsibility-free. The rest of dinner was torture. Mom and Sarah spent an hour criticizing my life choices. Why was I still single? Did I even try to meet men? Was I so focused on my career that I had forgotten how to be a woman? Each comment landed like a small knife. Death by 1,000 cuts. And through it all, Dad said nothing. He just ate his chicken and avoided my eyes. The silent enabler who let his wife and younger daughter tear into me while he pretended not to notice. There was one other person at that dinner who saw everything. My Uncle David, Mom's older brother, sat at the far end of the table in his usual spot. He was 72. A retired police officer who had moved in with my parents 2 years ago after his wife passed away. Uncle David rarely spoke during these family gatherings, but I always felt his eyes on me, watching, assessing. That night, I caught him looking at me with an expression I could not quite name. Pity. Maybe. Or anger on my behalf. After dinner, I helped Mom clear the dishes, because that was what good daughters did. Sarah had disappeared upstairs to take a phone call, and Dad had retreated to his study. I was loading the dishwasher when I heard voices from the living room. Mom and Sarah, talking in those loud whispers that people use when they think no one else is listening. I can't believe she actually agreed to pay the property taxes, Sarah said, her voice dripping with amusement. God, she's so pathetic. Shh. She'll hear you, Mom replied. But she was laughing. Actually laughing. But you're right. Your sister has always been the useful one. Not pretty like you. Not fun. But at least she's good for something. I stood frozen at the kitchen sink. A plate in my hands. Water running over my fingers. The useful one. Good for something. I heard Dad's voice join them. Must have come out of his study to listen. Well? She makes good money, he said with a chuckle. Might as well put it to good use. She's not spending it on herself. Clearly. Have you seen how she dresses? They all laughed at that. My own family. The people I had sacrificed everything for. Laughing at me in the house I paid for. Sitting on furniture I bought. After eating food purchased with my money. I carefully set the plate in the dishwasher and walked out of the kitchen. None of them noticed me leave. I grabbed my coat from the front closet and let myself out the front door. My hands shaking so badly I could barely grip my car keys. I sat in my car in their driveway for 10 minutes, just breathing, trying to process what I had heard. But I could not. The words kept playing in my head on repeat. Pathetic. Useful. Good for something. Not pretty. Not fun. I drove home in a daze. My vision blurred, with tears I refused to let fall. I had learned a long time ago that crying changed nothing. So I swallowed the tears, added this new hurt to the mountain of old ones, and told myself it did not matter. Except it did matter. It mattered so much I could barely breathe. I spent that night sitting on my cheap futon, staring at my bank account on my laptop screen. All those numbers, all that money I had earned through grueling hours and constant stress. And what did I have to show for it? A tiny apartment, secondhand furniture, and a family that saw me as nothing more than a piggy bank to be shaken whenever they needed spare change. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Uncle David. Ellie, you need to see this. Below the text was a video file. My heart started pounding before I even opened it. The video was dark and shaky, clearly recorded on a phone that someone was trying to keep hidden. But the audio was crystal clear. I recognized the voices immediately. Mom, Dad, and Sarah. The same conversation I had partially overheard in the living room. Except Uncle David had recorded more, had captured the entire vicious exchange. She's such a pushover. Sarah's voice came through, harsh and gleeful. I told you she'd pay for my car repairs without even questioning it. She probably thinks I'll pay her back. More laughter. As if Eleanor has always been the easy one, Mom said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her tone. She's desperate for approval. Always has been. We could probably ask her for twice as much, and she'd hand it over with a smile. She's too dumb to realize we're using her, Dad added. Or maybe she knows and just doesn't have the spine to say no. Either way, we deserve this. We raised her. Didn't we? This is payback. Do you think she knows how pathetic she is? Sarah asked. 30 years old. No boyfriend. No life. Just work and sending us money. What a loser. Oh. She definitely knows, Mom replied. But she doesn't have the guts to do anything about it. She'll keep paying. Keep sacrificing. Keep being our little workhorse. That's just who Ellie is. Boring. Reliable. Useful Ellie. The video ended. I watched it again. And then a third time. With each viewing, something inside me grew colder and harder. The hurt was still there. Sharp and raw. But underneath it was something else. Something that felt like ice water in my veins. Clarity. I looked around my apartment. Really looked at it. This was what I had chosen. This small, shabby space. This lonely existence. Because I had convinced myself that being a good daughter meant setting myself on fire to keep others warm. And they had not just let me burn. They had roasted marshmallows over my flames and mocked me for it. My hands were steady when I picked up my phone and texted Uncle David. Thank you. His response came immediately. I'm sorry you had to hear it. But you needed to know. He was right. I did need to know. Because now I could never unhear it. Could never go back to pretending they loved me. That they valued me as anything other than a source of income. I set my phone down and opened my laptop. It was time to do something I should have done years ago. I started researching. Mortgage documents. Property deeds. Refinancing paperwork. 3 years ago. When my parents had wanted to refinance their house to get a lower interest rate, their credit had not been good enough on its own. They had needed a co-signer. Someone with excellent credit and steady income. They had asked me, their responsible eldest daughter, to help them out. Just a formality. They had said, your name will barely be on the paperwork. They had promised. I had signed those documents without really reading them, trusting that my parents would never put me in a bad position. I had been so naive. Now, as I pulled up the documents I had saved in my email, I read them carefully, and there it was, buried in the legal jargon. I was not just a co-signer. I was listed as a co-owner. The bank had required it as a condition of the refinance, given my parents' financial situation, which meant that half of that house, the house I had been paying for, was legally mine. A slow smile spread across my face. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had just discovered they were holding a winning hand in a game they had not known they were playing. I spent the rest of that night researching property law, partition actions, and my rights as a co-owner. By dawn, I had a plan. By Monday morning, I had an appointment with a lawyer. The days that followed were a strange mixture of normalcy and quiet determination. I went to work, smiled at colleagues, presented my designs in meetings. But underneath the calm surface, I was a woman on a mission. I did not answer calls from my family. When Mom texted asking about the property tax money, I responded with a simple, I'm looking into it. Nothing more. On Thursday, I met with Ms. Albright, a real estate attorney whose office was in a sleek high-rise downtown. She was exactly what I needed. A sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and an expression that suggested she had seen every dirty trick in the book and invented a few of her own. I laid out my situation in clear, unemotional terms. Showed her the mortgage documents, the bank statements proving I had been making payments, the text messages from my family treating me like their personal ATM, and then I played her the video Uncle David had sent me. Ms. Albright's expression did not change as she listened to my family mock me and gloat about using me. When the video ended, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want out," I said. "I want to file a partition action. I want to force the sale of the house and get my share. Your family won't be happy about that. They haven't been happy with me for years," I replied. "The only difference is now I don't care." "Ms. Continuous." Albright nodded slowly, and I thought I saw a hint of approval in her eyes. "This will take time. And it might get ugly. I have time. And it's already ugly. Then let's proceed." The first step was simple but significant. I stopped making the mortgage payments. Just stopped. I did not tell my family. Did not explain. Did not warn them. I simply let the automatic transfer I had set up years ago lapse. The next month's mortgage payment was due on the 15th. I let that deadline pass. Then I waited. At first, there was nothing. My phone stayed silent. I went about my life, working on my projects, sleeping better than I had in months. There was something liberating about the silence. About not having to check my phone every 5 minutes for another demand disguised as a request. The text started on day 20. "Mom." Her tone still sweet but with an edge of confusion. "Honey. The bank called about a missed payment. Did you forget to transfer the mortgage money?" I read the text and set my phone face down on my desk. Did not respond. Just went back to work. Day 30 brought more texts. These ones more urgent. From Mom. From Dad. Even one from Sarah that just read, "What the fuck, Ellie? Pay the mortgage." I deleted them all without responding. By day 45, the panic was setting in. Mom called 6 times in one evening. I let every call go to voicemail. Her messages went from concerned to angry to desperate. "Eleanor Vance. You call me back right now! What is wrong with you? Your father and I need to talk to you immediately." I listened to each voicemail once, my face expressionless, and then deleted them. Day 60 brought the first notice from the bank. A warning letter about missed payments and the possibility of foreclosure proceedings if the situation was not rectified immediately. I knew about that letter because Ms. Albright had prepared me for it. I knew my parents received one too. I could only imagine their panic as they opened that official envelope and realized the gravy train had not just stopped. It had derailed entirely. Sarah showed up at my apartment on day 70. I heard her pounding on my door, her voice shrill through the wood. "Ellie! Open this door! Mom's losing her mind. What the hell is wrong with you?" I sat on my futon, reading a book, and waited for her to leave. It took 20 minutes of yelling and pounding before she finally gave up. I heard her shout, "Bitch!" through the door before her footsteps receded down the hallway. Day 80 brought phone calls from relatives I had not heard from in years. Apparently, my parents had called everyone they knew, spinning some story about how their ungrateful daughter had abandoned them in their time of need. I blocked each number as it called. Let them think what they wanted. On day 90, the official foreclosure notice arrived. Ms. Albright called me to let me know that the bank was proceeding with legal action. My parents had 45 days to either bring the mortgage current or vacate the property. They've been calling the bank constantly. As Albright told me, trying to explain that their daughter usually pays, that this is all a misunderstanding. The bank doesn't care. They want their money. Good, I said. Your family is going to come after you hard, she warned. Be prepared. She was right. That evening, all 3 of them showed up at my apartment. I watched through the peephole as they stood in the hallway, their faces masks of fury and panic. Mom's hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged. Dad looked 10 years older, his face gray with stress. Sarah just looked angry, her jaw clenched, her eyes blazing. Mom knocked, her voice wavering between anger and desperation. Ellie, we know you're in there. Open this door right now. We need to talk. I did not move, did not make a sound. Just watched them through the tiny glass circle, seeing them as they truly were for perhaps the first time. Not my family. My exploiters. "This is insane," Dad shouted, his voice cracking. "You're going to let us lose our home after everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed at that. After everything they had done for me. The only thing they had ever done for me was teach me that I was not worth loving unless I was useful. They stayed for over an hour, knocking and pleading and threatening by turns. I sat on my futon and listened to every word, letting their desperation wash over me like rain. When they finally left, I stood up, made myself a cup of tea, and went to bed. The next morning, I showed up at the house in Bellevue unannounced. It was Saturday, mid-morning, and I knew they would all be home. I used my key to let myself in, walking through the front door like I owned the place. Because technically, I did. Half of it. Anyway. They were all in the living room, looking like they had not slept. The coffee table was covered in papers, bank statements and foreclosure notices and desperate scribbled notes. They looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mom lunged to her feet. "Where have you been? Do you have any idea what you've done? We're going to lose everything." I looked at her calmly, my hands in my coat pockets. "I know." "You know?" Dad stood up too, his face red. "You know, and you just didn't care enough to stop it?" "Oh, I care," I said softly. "I just don't care about you anymore." Sarah's eyes went wide. "What the fuck is your problem?" I pulled out my phone and played the video Uncle David had sent me. Turned the volume up so they could hear every word clearly. Their own voices. Mocking me. Using me. Laughing at how pathetic I was. The room went silent except for the audio of their cruelty. I watched their faces as they listened. Mom went pale. Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Sarah just stared at the phone, her expression unreadable. When the video ended, I put my phone away. "That's my problem." "Who recorded that?" Mom whispered. "Who sent that to you?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "Is any of it untrue?" She opened her mouth but no words came out. I walked over to the coffee table and set down a thick folder. "These are legal documents. I'm filing a partition action to force the sale of this house. In case you've forgotten, I'm a co-owner. That means I have the right to sell my half. And since you can't buy me out, the court will order the entire property sold and the proceeds split." "You can't do this." Dad's voice was a roar. "This is our home. It's my home too," I said, my voice ice cold. "Or it would be. If you'd ever treated me like family instead of a walking checkbook." "We made mistakes," Mom said, tears starting to fall. "We said horrible things. But we love you. Ellie. You're our daughter." "No," I said quietly. "I was your bank account. There's a difference." I looked around the house one last time, at all the things I had bought. All the comfort and security I had provided for people who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. The beautiful furniture. The art on the walls. The plush carpet under my feet. I had built them a paradise and they had made it my hell. "You have 45 days," I told them. "After that, the bank will seize the property. My lawyer will be in touch about the partition sale. I suggest you start packing." Sarah found her voice then, and it was full of venom. "You're really going to do this? You're going to put your own family on the street?" I looked at her. This sister who had never worked a day, she did not have to, who had spent my money like water and mocked me for my generosity. "You did this to yourselves," I said. "I just stopped enabling you." I walked out of that house and I did not look back. Behind me, I could hear Mom sobbing, Dad shouting, Sarah screaming. The sounds of a family imploding. But I felt nothing except a lightness I had not experienced in years. Like I had been carrying a boulder on my shoulders and had finally set it down. Over the next month, the calls and texts never stopped. But they changed in tone. At first, They were angry, threatening. They called me selfish, cruel, ungrateful. They told me I would regret this, that I was destroying the family. I blocked those numbers. Then came the bargaining phase. They would do better. They promised. They would pay me back. Every penny. They just needed one more chance. Just one more. Please. I deleted those messages unread. Finally came the desperation. Mom's texts were incoherent. Rambling apologies mixed with guilt trips. Dad actually showed up at my office. Security had to escort him out when he refused to leave the lobby. Sarah created a fake email address to send me long screeds about what a terrible person I was, how I had ruined her life. I forwarded everything to Mrs. Albright and told her to proceed with the partition action. The house sold at auction, 67 days after the foreclosure process began. It went for substantially less than market value, the way foreclosed properties usually do, but even split two ways. My half of the proceeds was $180,000, more than I had given them over the years, but not by much. I used that money to buy myself a small condo in a different neighborhood, a 2-bedroom with actual furniture I picked out myself, art on the walls that I chose because I liked it, not because it would impress anyone. It was not large, but it was mine. Truly, completely mine. No one else's name on the deed. No more sacrificing my happiness for people who did not value me. My family moved into a small rental apartment on the outskirts of the city. I heard this through Uncle David, who kept me updated despite my parents' attempts to cut him off for betraying them. Sarah finally had to get a job, working retail for minimum wage. Dad's golf club membership had to be canceled. Mom had to learn how to budget for the first time in her life. I felt no guilt about any of it. 3 months after everything was settled, Uncle David came to visit me in my new place. He was the only family member I had maintained contact with, the only one who had seen what was happening and tried to help me break free. We sat on my new couch, real leather that I had saved up for and bought myself, drinking coffee from mugs I had chosen at a local pottery shop. "They're struggling," Uncle David said, not as an accusation, just stating a fact. "I know," I replied. "How are they blaming me today?" He smiled grimly. "The usual. You're heartless. You're vindictive. You ruined their lives." Sarah posted something on social media about ungrateful family members. "Your mom cries a lot." "Good," I said. And I meant it. Let them cry. Let them struggle. Let them finally understand what it feels like to have to support yourself instead of parasiting off someone else. "You know they're telling everyone you stole their house from them," Uncle David said. "Let them. Anyone who actually listens to the full story will understand. And anyone who doesn't is not someone I want in my life anyway." Uncle David nodded, looking at me with something like pride. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for." "I'm tired," I corrected. "There's a difference between strength and just being too exhausted to keep being abused." He squeezed my shoulder. "Either way, I'm proud of you." After he left, I stood at my living room window, looking out at the city skyline. I thought about the old me, the Ellie who would have done anything for a scrap of approval, who mistook being used for being loved. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone I used to know but no longer recognized. I had spent so many years building a home for people who never saw me as anything more than a tool. I had sacrificed my own happiness, my own security, my own life, trying to earn love that was never actually available. And when I finally stopped, when I finally said enough, they had the audacity to call me the villain. But I was not the villain. I was just someone who had finally learned that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Eventually, you burn up, and then you are no good to anyone, least of all yourself. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Mom's birthday is next month. Are you really not going to send a card?" I looked at the text for a long moment. Once upon a time, I would have agonized over this. Would have felt guilty. Would have sent not just a card but money. A gift. Something to prove I was still a good daughter. But that was then. This was now. I typed out a response. Tell her happy birthday from me. I hope she enjoys whatever celebration she can afford on her own budget. Then I blocked Sarah's number and went back to my evening. I had plans to meet a friend for dinner. A real friend who valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide. I had a life to live. One that I was building for myself this time. With materials that actually belonged to me. That night, lying in my new bed in my new home, I thought about revenge. Everyone thinks revenge has to be loud and dramatic. Some grand gesture of payback. But real revenge, the kind that actually matters, is quieter than that. It is simply refusing to be a victim anymore. It is taking back your life and building something beautiful with it. Something that does not include the people who tried to tear you down. I had spent years constructing a house, for my family. A beautiful shelter built on my sweat and sacrifice. And they had burned it down with their greed and cruelty. Now they could live in the ashes of what they had destroyed. While I built myself a new home somewhere they could never reach. As I closed my eyes, I felt something I had not experienced in over a decade. Peace. Real. Genuine. Bone-deep peace. The kind that comes from finally putting yourself first. And in the morning, I would wake up in my own bed. In my own home. Living my own life. That was not just revenge. That was freedom. That was everything. 6 months passed before I saw any of them again. And even then, it was purely by accident. I was at a coffee shop near my office, waiting in line for my usual cappuccino, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Sarah's voice. Though it sounded different somehow. Tired. Smaller. I turned slowly, keeping my face carefully neutral. She was standing 3 people back in line, wearing clothes I did not recognize. Not designer this time. Just ordinary jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No expensive highlights. No perfectly styled waves. She looked like a normal person for once. Someone who had to worry about money and work schedules like everyone else. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. I watched emotions flicker across her face. Surprise. Anger. Something that might have been shame. Then she looked away. Suddenly fascinated by her phone screen. I could have said something. Could have been petty. Could have made a comment about how the mighty had fallen. But I did not. Because the truth was, looking at her standing there in her ordinary clothes with her ordinary problems, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Not even pity. Just a vast, echoing nothing where all my complicated feelings about my family used to live. I got my coffee and left without saying a word. As I walked back to my office, I realized that this was the real victory. Not making them suffer. Not even getting my money back. The real victory was reaching a place where they simply did not matter to me anymore. That evening, I had dinner with my friend Jessica, someone I had met through work about a year ago. We had bonded over late nights at the office and a shared love of terrible reality TV shows. She was one of the first real friends I had made in years. Someone who liked me for who I was, rather than what I could do for them. Over pasta and wine, I told her about running into Pax, Sarah. Jessica listened, twirling her fork thoughtfully. How did it feel? She asked. Empty, I admitted. Like seeing a stranger. Someone I used to know in another life. Jessica nodded. That's healthy. You know, it means you've actually moved on. Not just pretended to. It is strange, though, I said, taking a sip of wine. I spent so many years revolving around them, organizing my entire life around their needs and demands. And now they're just people I used to know. Like old coworkers or former classmates. That is what happens when you finally put yourself first, Jessica said. You realize how much space all that resentment and obligation was taking up. And once you clear it out, you have room for actual good things. She She was right. In the months since I had cut my family off, my life had expanded in ways I had not expected. I had started taking a pottery class on weekends, something I had always wanted to try but never had time or money for. I had joined a hiking group and spent my Saturdays exploring trails in the Cascades. I had even gone on a few dates. Nothing serious yet. But it was nice to be open to the possibility of romance without the constant anxiety about what my family would think or demand. My career had flourished too, without the constant financial stress of supporting 3 other adults. I had been able to take on more challenging projects, the kind that required focus and creativity rather than just churning out billable hours as fast as possible. Last month, I had won a design competition for a public library project, something that would have been impossible when I was working myself to exhaustion just to keep my family afloat. 2 weeks after the coffee shop encounter, Uncle David called me with news. "Your father got a job," he said without preamble. "Part-time. But it is something. Stocking shelves at a grocery store." I processed this information silently. Richard Vance, who had retired at 60 claiming his back could not handle work anymore, was now stocking shelves. The irony was not lost on me. "Good for him," I said neutrally. "Your mother is working too," Uncle David continued. "Receptionist at a dental office. And Sarah is still at that retail job. But she picked up extra hours." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Not unkindly. Uncle David was quiet for a moment. "Because I want you to know that they are surviving. They are not happy about it. And they still complain constantly. But they are learning to take care of themselves. You do not need to feel guilty." "I do not feel guilty," I said, and realized with some surprise that it was true. "But thank you for the update. There is something else," Uncle David said, his tone shifting. "Your mother asked me to ask you something. She is too proud to call you herself." I sighed. "What does she want?" "She wants to know if you would be willing to meet for coffee. Just to talk. She says she is not asking for money or anything else. Just a chance to apologize properly." I stood up from my couch and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights. Part of me wanted to say no immediately, to maintain the clean break I had made. But another part, a smaller but persistent part, was curious. Not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I wanted to hear what she had to say. Wanted to know if she had actually learned anything or if this was just another manipulation. "I will. Think about it," I told Uncle David. "That is all I ask," he said gently. "No pressure either way. You have earned the right to make whatever choice is best for you." After we hung up, I sat with the question for several days. I talked to Jessica about it. I talked to my therapist, a woman named Dr. Chen, whom I had started seeing 3 months ago to process everything that had happened. I even made a pro and con list, something my architectural training had taught me to do when facing difficult decisions. In the end, I decided to meet with Mom. Not because I owed her anything, and certainly not because I was ready to forgive and forget, but because I wanted closure on my own terms. I wanted to look her in the eye as the person I had become, not the person she had molded me to be. We met at a neutral location, a small cafe in a neighborhood neither of us frequented. I arrived first, claiming a table near the back where we could talk privately. When Mom walked in 10 minutes later, I barely recognized her. She had aged years in the span of months. Her hair, always professionally colored and styled, was now showing gray roots and pulled back in a simple clip. She wore minimal makeup, and her clothes, while clean and presentable, were clearly not the designer labels she used to favor. But more than her appearance, it was her demeanor that had changed. The confident, commanding presence I remembered was gone, replaced by something smaller and more tentative. She spotted me and walked over slowly, clutching her purse like a lifeline. When she sat down across from me, I could see her hands were shaking. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was not sure you would. I almost did not. I replied honestly. I am still not sure why I am here. Mom nodded, looking down at the table. I deserve that. I deserve much worse than that. Actually, a waitress came by, and we both ordered coffee. The silence between us was heavy, weighted with years of hurt and resentment. When the waitress left, Mom finally looked up at me. I have been thinking about what I want to say to you for months now, she began. I have rehearsed it 100 times. But now that you are sitting here, I realize that nothing I say can actually make this right. Nothing I say can undo what we did to you. I stayed silent, waiting. I had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply let someone else fill the silence. We used you, Mom continued, her voice cracking. We used you, terribly. And we convinced ourselves it was justified because we had raised you. Because you were family. Because you were doing well and we were not. We turned you into an ATM and then mocked you for being generous. We took advantage of your love and your loyalty. And when you finally stood up for yourself, we called you the villain. Tears were streaming down her face now, but I felt no urge to comfort her. These were her tears to cry. Her guilt to carry. I had carried enough for both of us over the years. That video you played, she whispered. Hearing our own words played back. Hearing how cruel we were. How dismissive. Ellie, I cannot tell you how ashamed I am. How disgusted I am with myself. What kind of mother says those things about her own daughter? The kind who never saw me as a daughter in the first place, I said quietly. Just a resource to be exploited. Mom flinched as if I had slapped her. You are right. God help me. You are absolutely right. And I cannot even say I did not know what I was doing. I knew. We all knew. We just did not care because it was easier to take advantage of you than to fix our own problems. Our coffee arrived. Mom wrapped her hands around her cup but did not drink. Just stared into the dark liquid like it held answers. Losing the house was the worst thing that ever happened to us, she said. But it was also the wake-up call we desperately needed. Your father and I had been coasting for so long, relying on you to fund a lifestyle we had not earned. Sarah had never learned to be responsible because we never made her. We were all parasites, feeding off you. And we did not even realize how toxic we had become until you cut us off. And now, I asked, now that you have had your wake-up call, what has changed? Mom finally looked at me directly. Everything. We are all working now. Real jobs that we have to show up for and actually perform. We live within our means. Or we try to. It is hard. Ellie. It is so much harder than I ever imagined. Having to budget. Having to say no to things we want. Having to be accountable for our own bills and expenses. I never appreciated how much you were doing for us. How much you were sacrificing. I am glad you are learning that, I said. Genuinely. But that does not change anything between us. You did not just take my money, Mom. You took my dignity. You mocked me while I was bleeding myself dry to keep you comfortable. That is not something I can just forgive because you had to get a job. I know, she said, nodding. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking for anything. Actually, I just wanted you to know that I see what we did now. I see it clearly. And it horrifies me. You deserved so much better from us. You deserved parents who were proud of you for who you were. Not just what you could provide. You deserved a sister who supported you instead of mocking you. You deserved a family that loved you. I did. I agreed. And I never got that. So I built my own life instead. I heard you won some kind of design award, Mom said softly. David told me. He is very proud of you. Uncle David has been kinder to me than my actual parents ever were, I said. He is the only one who saw what was happening and tried to help me. He has been pretty clear about his disappointment in us, Mom admitted. He barely speaks to your father and me anymore. Says we do not deserve his time until we prove we have actually changed. He is a smart man. Mom smiled sadly. He always was. I should have listened to him years ago when he tried to tell me we were being too hard on you. Too demanding. But I did not want to hear it. We sat in silence for a few moments, sipping our coffee. I studied my mother's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine remorse. It did not change how I felt. Did not erase the years of hurt. But it was something. What do you want from this conversation? I asked finally. What is the endgame here? Mom looked startled by the directness of the question. I do not know, she admitted. I guess I wanted you to know that I am sorry. That we are all sorry. Even if Sarah and your father are too stubborn to say it properly. I wanted you to know that you were not wrong to cut us off. That you had every right to protect yourself from us. And I wanted you to know that I hope, someday, when enough time has passed and we have proven we have actually changed, that maybe you might consider letting us back into your life. Not as your financial dependents. Not as people you have to take care of. But just as family. Whatever that might look like. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Mom, I appreciate you saying all of this. I do. And I believe that you mean it right now. In this moment. But I need you to understand something. I am not holding my breath waiting for you to change. I am not leaving a door open for you to waltz back into my life when you decide you have suffered enough. I have built a life without you. A good life. And I am not going to jeopardize that based on promises of future improvement. I understand, Mom said. And I thought she actually did. If you genuinely change, Tick. If you become people I would actually want in my life. Then maybe, years from now, we can revisit this conversation. But that change has to be real and sustained, not just a temporary reaction to consequences. And even then, I'm not promising anything. You burned a lot of bridges, and some of them cannot be rebuilt. That is more than fair, Mom said. It is more than we deserve. Honestly, I stood up, pulling my coat on. I need to go. I have a pottery class in an hour. Mom looked up at me, and there was something like wonder in her eyes. Pottery class. You always wanted to try that. Yes. I did. And now I can. Because I am not working 80 hours a week to fund someone else's lifestyle. I left money on the table for both our coffees. Old habits dying hard. And walked toward the door. I was halfway there when Mom called out. Ellie? I turned back. For what it is worth, I really am proud of you. Not for what you can do for us, but for who you are. You are strong and talented and brave. And you built yourself a good life in spite of us. Not because of us. That takes real courage. I nodded once, acknowledging her words without committing to anything, and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. The truth was, I did not know if I would ever have a relationship with my mother again. Part of me hoped that she was sincere, that she really was changing, that maybe someday we could have something resembling a healthy family dynamic. But a larger, wiser part of me knew that it did not really matter. I had spent too many years waiting for them to love me the way I needed to be loved. Waiting for them to see me as more than just a resource. I was not going to spend any more of my life waiting. That night, I sat in my pottery class, my hands covered in clay, shaping a bowl on the wheel in front of me. The instructor, a gentle woman in her 60s named Margaret, moved around the room offering advice and encouragement. When she got to my wheel, she smiled. That is coming along beautifully, she said. You have a natural sense of balance. I looked down at my bowl. Still rough and unfinished, but with good bones. With potential. Thank you, I said. I am still learning. We are always learning, Margaret replied. That is the beauty of it. Every piece teaches you something new. After class, I carefully moved my bowl to the drying shelf, where it would sit, until next week when I could trim and glaze it. As I washed the clay from my hands, I thought about what Margaret had said. We are always learning. Every piece teaches you something new. My family had taught me painful lessons about love and loyalty and the difference between the two. They had taught me that sacrifice without reciprocation is not virtue. It is just self-destruction. They had taught me that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the worst. But they had also, inadvertently, taught me something valuable. They had taught me my own worth. Not the worth they assigned to me based on my paycheck, but my inherent worth as a person. They had taught me that I deserved better, and that it was not selfish to demand it. They had taught me that walking away from toxicity was not cruelty. It was self-preservation. And now, in the space they had once occupied in my life, I was learning new lessons. I was learning that real friendship felt like ease, not obligation. I was learning that I was capable of joy without guilt attached to it. I was learning that spending money on myself did not make me selfish. It made me human. I was learning that I could be loved for who I was, not what I provided. 3 weeks after my coffee meeting with Mom, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "From Sarah," and for a moment I considered deleting it without reading. But curiosity got the better of me. The email was short and awkwardly written, like Sarah had started and stopped multiple times before finally hitting send. Ellie, I do not know if you will even read this, but I wanted to try. Mom told me she met with you and that you were willing to listen to her. So maybe you will listen to me too. I have been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I realize now how horrible I was to you. How horrible we all were. I called you pathetic and said you were a loser. And the truth is, you were the only one of us who had your shit together. You were working hard and supporting yourself and us. And I was coasting through life expecting everything to be handed to me. I am not proud of who I was. I am trying to be better. I have been at my retail job for 8 months now, and I actually got promoted to shift supervisor. It is not much, but it is mine. I earned it. And I am starting to understand what you must have felt all those years. Working so hard while I just took and gave nothing back. I am sorry. I know that does not fix anything. But I mean it. I am sorry for using you. I am sorry for mocking you. I am sorry for being the worst sister imaginable. You deserved better. I hope you are happy now. I hope you are living the life you always should have had. Sarah. I read the email 3 times, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden requests for money. But there was nothing like that. Just what seemed like genuine contrition. I closed my laptop without responding. Maybe someday I would reply. But not today. Today I was still processing. Still healing. Still learning to trust that people's words match their actions. A year passed. A year of pottery classes and hiking trips and dinners with friends. A year of therapy sessions where I unpacked decades of conditioning and learned to recognize my own patterns of people-pleasing and self-sacrifice. A year of dating. Some good dates and some bad ones. But all of them teaching me what I wanted and what I would no longer tolerate. A year of focusing on my career and taking on projects that excited me rather than just paid the bills. Uncle David kept me loosely updated on my family's progress. Dad was still working at the grocery store and had gotten a small raise. Mom had been promoted at the dental office. Sarah had moved out of their apartment and into a place with roommates, taking responsibility for her own rent for the first time in her life. They were surviving, even beginning to thrive in small ways. I was happy for them, in an abstract sort of way. Happy that they were learning to be functional adults. But their progress did not change my boundaries. I still did not call them, did not text them, did not send birthday cards or holiday gifts. My life had moved forward without them, and I had no desire to go backward. On the anniversary of the day, I had stopped paying their mortgage. I did, something symbolic. I took myself out to an expensive dinner. The kind of restaurant I used to fantasize about but never went to because I was always sending my money elsewhere. I ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, ate a perfectly prepared steak, and finished with a decadent chocolate dessert. When the check came, it was over $200 for just me. Old Ellie would have been horrified at the extravagance. would have calculated how many mortgage payments that could have covered. But new Ellie just smiled, pulled out her credit card, and paid without a second thought. Because I had earned this money. I had worked hard for it. And I deserved to enjoy the fruits of my labor. As I walked home that night, full and happy and slightly tipsy from the wine, I thought about the concept of revenge. When I had first discovered my family's betrayal, I had wanted to hurt them the way they had hurt me. I had wanted them to feel the pain and humiliation I had endured. And for a while, watching them lose their house and struggle with jobs and face the consequences of their actions, I had felt a savage satisfaction. But a year later, I realized that the revenge was not actually in their suffering. The revenge was in my happiness. The revenge was in building a life so full and rich and satisfying that I did not need them anymore. The revenge was in becoming the person I was always meant to be, unburdened by their expectations and demands. They had tried to make me small, to keep me useful and grateful and desperate for their approval. And instead, I had become vast. I had become free. I had become myself. That was the sweetest revenge of all. Not making them suffer, but making myself happy. Not tearing them down, but building myself up. Not looking back in anger, but looking forward with hope. I still carry the scars of those years. I probably always will. There are moments when I catch myself overworking, when I feel guilty for spending money on myself, when I default to people-pleasing behaviors that I learned in childhood. But now I recognize those patterns. I stop myself. I remind myself that I am worth more than what I can do for others. And slowly, month by month, year by year, I am healing. I am becoming whole in a way I never was when I was breaking myself into pieces to fill other people's voids. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if my family thinks about me. If they regret what they did. If they have really changed, or if they are just better at hiding their toxicity. But those thoughts come less frequently now. And when they do not have the power to hurt me the way they once did. Because the truth is, it does not matter anymore. Whether they regret it or not. Whether they changed or not. Whether they miss me or not. None of it matters. I am no longer living my life in reaction to them. I am living my life for me. And that, I have learned, is the only way to truly win. Not by destroying your enemies, but by building a life so good that your enemies become irrelevant. Not by proving them wrong, but by becoming so secure in yourself that their opinions lose all power. I built them a house with my love and my money and my endless patience. They burned it down with their greed and their cruelty. And from those ashes, I built myself a castle. One where I am the sole resident, the sole ruler, the sole beneficiary of all my hard work. They are welcome to their struggling little lives in their rental apartment, learning lessons they should have learned decades ago. I am busy over here in my castle, living the life I always deserved. And some nights, when I am curled up on my couch with a good book and a glass of wine, when sunlight streams through the windows I paid for in a home that is truly mine, I raise that glass in a silent toast. To freedom. To boundaries. To choosing yourself. To walking away from people who drain you, even when those people are family. To building a life that makes you happy instead of a life that makes you useful. To revenge that looks like peace. To justice that looks like joy. To victories so quiet that no one else even realizes you have won. That is the story of how I lost my family and found myself. And I would make the same choice again in a heartbeat.